Hello everyone, and welcome back to Power to the People. I'm your host, Corbin Snardon, and we're here to give you the information that you need to empower your community. Today, we're going to be having a candid conversation about education, and I have my guest here with me today, none other than respected educator and principal, Mrs. Allene Houston-Jones. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. So we know that you're a noted educator and school principal. So tell us, how did you get into education? What's your background?
Well, my background is I taught kindergarten for about 8 years in the state of Illinois. And then from there, in the same building where I taught kindergarten, I became an elementary principal. I did that for 10 years. And so I left the state of Illinois as far as teaching goes and education goes. And I've been here in the Paducah area for the last 5 years. Within the 5 years, I was assistant principal for 3 of those years, and this is my 2nd year as principal.
Well, awesome. So what made you want to go into education?
Well, it's surprisingly that I had an awesome kindergarten teacher. If you can go back to your kindergarten years, I had an awesome kindergarten teacher. And so, you know, I grew up around her because her son and I were in the same class. And so that just sparked me, you know, to really want to be an educator and also to give back, you know, to my community.
Well, awesome. So when we think about those teachers that had the impact, and we think about, you know, a kindergarten teacher, you have to go way back to think about kindergarten teachers. What was it that he or she did that really sparked that interest in you? You said that, you know, they really had a spark that made you want to go into there. What do you remember most about that person that put you into education as a field?
Well, you know, growing up, I was just really shy, and so I know I was a shy kindergartner. And I can just remember, you know, that teacher just being that motherly figure for me, and just guiding me, you know, through the process of being a kindergartner. And so, you know, when I looked back over, you know, my years of being a student, I just remembered, you know, how I felt, you know, important in that teacher's eyes. And I really wanted to do that for other students when I became a teacher.
Well, awesome. So several years in the game now, you know, you've been at different levels. You've been in the classroom, you've been an administrator, and starting and seeing the kind of the long arc of education from then till now, what would you say has changed?
A whole lot has changed. This is my 25th year in education. And I can recall when I first started being a teacher, the teachers that were there often talked about the different things that are starting to return in their tenure. You know, they were probably 25 years or more into, you know, education at the time that I went in. And so I have seen, you know, where things are starting to return, that, you know, the things that teachers are required to do in the classroom has returned. There's so much more, you know, responsibility that teachers have. The testing really has been a real spark. You know, I just don't remember testing being, you know, so much at the forefront as it is today.
Yeah. So we see testing is a major issue. You know, we're both in education, and we see that now. I'm not 25 years in yet, but, you know, I can remember even being in school that we didn't test as much as when I was a student, and now we see that is a big thing. And you mentioned different things just are coming back around. We always joke about education being a cycle, you know, just give it 5 years and they'll bring it back with a different name. So thinking about back then to now, what did you feel like was the biggest issue maybe in education back then? I know accountability is the big word now, but when you first started teaching, what would you say was the primary concern of educators then? Well,
you know, and I don't know if it was just, you know, much more about the school district that I was in, but it really was about, you know, how are we going to help those students that are struggling? Because our building at that time, we were struggling academically. And we were always trying to find ways to help those students that were struggling. But it was building wide. It wasn't just a particular classroom here or there. It was the overall school that was struggling. And so we were really trying to figure out what can we do differently? How can we help our students to succeed? But it started with the educators, started with the classroom teachers. And so the teachers were being trained in order to be able to help the students in the classroom.
Awesome. And so in mentioning that, you know, trying to get the school to academically succeed, excuse me, what were the barriers in the way?
A lot of and I was an elementary from pre-K to second grade, so a lot of what we saw was that our students didn't have the background knowledge. They lacked that. You know, they had trouble, you know, learning to read. They had trouble learning their basic math facts. And so we saw a lot of that, you know, transition in. We had a lot of truancy. So, you know, our students missed a lot of days, or we had students that left our district and came back. And so some of that played, we felt, into why our students struggled. They just did not have the foundation that they needed.
I think that foundation is so critical, and it really even starts long before they ever come into the classroom.
Absolutely.
So, you know, seeing kids in early childhood education in the pre-K ages, or even before then as infants, just making sure that kids have those supports and things, not just at home, but also outside of the home. I think those are key things. Did you see those as an educator? I mean, I know you mentioned that academically there were some struggles and that it was difficult to get kids there, but were you seeing the support from parents in the community?
For the most part, we would see some, you know, parent commitment, but others, you know, we had at that time we had a lot of young mothers, so you know they didn't know what to do themselves, and so they were always encouraged, though, read with your children at home. When I taught kindergarten, that was the thing that I try to get our parents to see, is that to help their child read, we would like for their parents to read with them or read to them. But that was a struggle for many of our parents. They worked, you know, they had to, you know, support their children, and so they always didn't have that extra time to spend. We saw a lot of grandparents at that time was starting to pick up the pieces for, you know, the parent that wasn't there to raise their children. And so it was hard for the grandparents as well to do the things that, you know, we would like for parents to do at an early age.
Yeah, I have a friend in education as well that also always says that, you know, many parents are giving the best that they can, but, you know, if you're that parent or a single parent, whatever type of environment you're coming in from, you know, if you have to work, you know, giving your child that time at the end of the day when you've come in off of a 12-hour shift to read is difficult for some kids. And, you know, we have seen a lot of grandparents kind of step into the foray. So you mentioned that that was then. Has anything changed significantly then to now? What would you say are the biggest issues facing education today?
I think there's, well, for one, I think social media. Of course, at that time, you know, I taught kindergarten, but as a building principal, you know, social media wasn't out there. You know, students didn't have, you know, their own cell phones. But working at the middle school now, social media plays a big part in you know, affecting what our students do at school. How they come into school, whether they are ready to learn or whether they have just experienced, you know, someone, you know, saying mean things to them or threatening to beat them up before they come to school. Or they've spent a lot of time, I guess, playing video games. So, you know, that's basically what they would like to do when they come to school is, you know, still be on their cell phones. Right. They, you know, the thing that they want to do after school is go home and play video games instead of doing their homework or instead of reading, you know, for 20 minutes a night, which we would love for them to be able to do. Absolutely.
So, you know, being at the middle grade level now, which is a very awkward age, as we know, and seeing the rise of technology and especially social media in there. I know you mentioned that, you know, they might have to deal with cyberbullying, but what else are you finding in the technological aspect that kids are getting involved to that's helping or hurting the classroom?
Helping, I would say that, you know, the students are able to go to sites that they know that are educational, that can help them, you know, improve in particular areas such as math or reading. Hurting them, you know, they're not always going to the best sites. You know, even at school, you know, we'll get reports on you know, students and the sites that they go to, and sometimes it gets them in trouble.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
They're going to sites that are very inappropriate, and it's not educational.
Right. You know, I think the internet and social media, other forms of technology like that, you know, they're very useful, but, you know, my parents didn't grow up with that. They didn't understand how it worked, and I kind of came up in the tail end of it, and, you know, generations before me didn't have access to those kinds of things, and I see now that many parents or grandparents, you know, they just don't understand some of the things that kids are doing now. They don't understand, like, why is Snapchat a big deal? Why do you have to scroll through Instagram and watch these stories? You know, they don't understand how kids communicate this way now. And really the dangers sometimes of it. Do you guys do any education efforts to teach kids how to safely navigate the internet, to how to safely navigate social media?
Well, we have a teacher that teaches, technology, and she speaks on, cyberbullying, appropriate sites to get on. She does that with our students. We have, groups that come in. Right now we have Lotus that's coming in. They're not specifically talking about cyberbullying and things like that, but that is one of the things that they're sharing with our students. Also in regards to discrimination and harassment, they're speaking on those type of topics as well.
All right, good. Those are all good things. So let's talk about parents here for a moment. So every good school is only going to be as good as the community that it's in. Parent involvement, we know from pre-K all the way even into college, is a very key component for student success. How do you engage parents in your school?
To engage parents, it's a hard thing to do at times. We try to engage our parents to come in for activities that we have, for band, for choir. Our parents come out, they're wonderful. But there's things that we need to do better, at the school that I'm at to engage our parents. We try to, make phone calls, we try to send emails. One of the things I try to do is when we have progress reports, report cards, is to send an all call out to all of our parents, just alerting them, that progress reports have come out, report cards have come out, because many times our students don't go home and say, Mom, I've got my report card, here it is. We are trying to find, activities to do after school to get our parents to come in, so that they know, what we're doing at Paducah Middle School.
Oh, awesome. So when we see, parent involvement, I find in my own personal experience, some of the things that you said, both of us being in education, seeing parents come to I'll say the fun stuff, they come to the band concerts, they come to the football games, they come to all the sporting events. But we see fewer and fewer of them come to things like parent-teacher conferences or academically related things. What is your viewpoint on that? Is there something that we can do to fix that? Has that always been an issue?
Since I've been in the middle school sector, from what I'm seeing, it tends to be like parents are a little bit more susceptible to, no longer hold their children's hand, to guide them along the way because they're older. At the elementary school, they're there, they're, guiding them. But, I don't want parents to forget that, these students their children still need guidance. Yeah. We try to, hold parent meetings, and it's, most of the time it's due to grades or behavior. But that's still important because we want our students to be successful in the classroom. We do have parents who call us and will say, I'm concerned, I would like to set up a parent meeting. And we always, try to do what the parent would like for us to do, because once again, we want the students to be successful. Yeah,
absolutely. I think about, the middle school age kid, that's the age that they're like, oh, Mom, don't give me a hug anymore. Don't come to school with me anymore. Drop me off at the corner. Don't drop me off at the door. And it can be challenging for a parent to figure out the balance. So, giving their teenager some space, but also still being academically involved. And speaking of academics, we know that academics has evolved even since, we were both in our school day ages. There came a point where my parents couldn't help me with my work anymore. And so, we're seeing parents now, kids get at that age, especially at middle school, where, they didn't have this kind of math when I was in school. They didn't have this when I was in school. How is a parent able to help their child when their student gets to that level of work that they're no longer able to assist their child on?
Well, they can always contact, the classroom teacher. The classroom teacher is always willing to help out. A lot of the times you go on social media, they go on the internet, they can find ways to help their children. We also, our students are able to do online types of assessments and things like that. And the students can do that at home as well. And so those type of programs can help a student and the parent for the student to get a better understanding of what they're doing.
Well, awesome. So looking at the school as a community pillar. You know, every child is going to go to school at some point in time, and a lot of kids through this area are going to pass through your school. So when we think about your school being a community figurehead, how does it get involved in the community? What are some ways that you as an administrator and your staff, what are some ways that they get involved in the community?
Well, for one, we have a beta club, and so the person who's in charge of the beta club tries to reach out and do things that, you know, that's within the community. You know, we have teachers that are, you know, we have a coffee program at our school where, you know, our students are helping to prepare the coffee. They bring the coffee to the adults, you know, every Friday, and then they are going to go out and, you know, go to the coffee shops and learn more about, you know, how a particular business, you know, works with coffee, and so our students are seen in that light. You know, we're always encouraging our students to volunteer. You know, we're going to have a blood drive in May at our school, and that was something that our students came up with. So, you know, that's giving back to the community in that way.
Awesome, some great opportunities there. So in keeping with, you know, being a community figurehead and getting those things, I think it's very crucial to get kids involved in things like business, like, you know, learning how the coffee industry works, which, you know, is not necessarily, you know, the multi-billion-dollar firm, but teaching kids those skills is really neat, especially at that young age, that kind of exposure. So exposing kids to different career fields is great. Do they get exposed to other particular fields outside of maybe the entrepreneurial sector? I know you mentioned the coffee. Are they exposed to any other careers?
Well, our 8th graders this year, they went to a career fair that was specifically for 8th graders, and it listed, well, they got to see how many business sectors in our community and beyond, you know, how much they would make if they were to be a lawyer, how much they would make if they worked in construction. And we went down, you know, to the Civic Center, and our students got to, you know, interact and talk about, you know, the different careers. We had our 7th graders who just recently came to, you know, West Kentucky to the reality store. So they got a taste of what it would be like if they had a family and, you know, they worked, you know, fast food, you know, what would they do to be able to, you know, to survive from month to month. So our students are getting, you know, the idea of what our community is about, and, you know, how they, as they get older, how they will be able to, you know, survive in the community. Awesome.
So let's ask a tough question here. We know that in Kentucky, education has been a political hotbed, no matter what your stance or what your side is on it. Are you finding that people are wanting to go into education? You mentioned that your kindergarten teacher was the inspiration for you going into education. Are you seeing more people wanting to go into the field?
No, not really. But it's funny that you asked that question. Just this weekend, I was with a group of students that we went to Fisk University. We toured Fisk University. Well, sort of toured it, but I had a young man on the bus who, by the way, I was his kindergarten teacher many years ago. He's a senior this year, and he's interested in elementary education. It was really surprising to hear because I generally do not hear young people wanting to, you know, get into education. Although, you know, at the school we do have, you know, students that are student teaching who are doing their practicum. But for me personally, I don't, and mainly, you know, people of color. I just do not see that very often.
And I think that that's kind of sad. You know, we're both African American, you know, and I can think about to my own educational experience. I did not have a teacher that looked like me until I got to college. And that was a real big influencer on like going into education. You know, my parents were both professionals and college educated, but I never had anybody that looked like me in the classroom, which I always thought was strange. In your personal opinion, what do you feel like is preventing more people of color from going into education?
I think it is probably the sense of, or the hearing that teachers don't make very much money, you know. And I think that they're going to the fields where, you know, if they get a 4-year degree, they're going to come out, they're going to make $60,000, and teachers just don't start, with that amount of money their first year of school. Well, it takes a while to get to $60,000 even in as a career as a teacher. So I think that is some of it. I think some of it may be, their experiences as being a student in school may deter them from wanting, to be a teacher. But then again, sometimes that can be, something that, charges them to want to be a teacher. They want to do things differently than, what happened to them when they were going into school. But I think some of it is just the money.
Yeah, obviously everybody wants a career that is able to financially support their family. I also think that in addition to that, that lack of representation, not seeing someone that looks like you, that makes a difference. That makes a very big difference. At least it did with me.
Well, me too. That was my same situation. I didn't see anyone of color until I got to college as well. So. And although I didn't mention it, that was one of the reasons why I also wanted to become a teacher.
Oh, wow. So, I think about, people that are the youth that are now going into college now and maybe pursuing a different path. I think also one thing that we don't do as educators is we don't promote the profession enough. We encourage kids to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, and those are all very respectable fields. But, I find it fewer and far between where we're actually having the conversation with saying, I think you'd be a good teacher. Johnny, I think you'd be great if you went into education, or you're really good with kids. Have you ever thought about this? I think we could do a better job with that.
I agree.
So as an administrator now, what would you say is the biggest difference between being in the classroom and being an administrator? How is that role different from where you were?
Well, what I will say is, before I may have had the responsibility of 20 to 25 students, and now currently have the responsibility of over 650 students, over 50 staff. So it's more responsibility. It's putting out fires, multiple fires. It's 1 minute I may have to work with a student, then the next minute I may be on the phone with a parent that is calling me because of an issue that their child has. And it's finding the time to balance being in the classrooms and observing teachers, and then having to, meet with parents or meet with community members. It's trying to put all of that together, and I'm quite busy during the day. So
never a dull moment,
no,
I'm sure.
No.
So when you talk about, being in that administrative role, obviously you can't do this all by yourself. I mean, I'm sure you have a fantastic group of people and a team of people that does that. And even among your teaching staff. So thinking about teachers, every teacher is different. You've got multiple teachers teaching different subjects. How do you find ways to balance that and create a cohesive staff?
It's hard. For me, I just try to be encouraging to my staff. I tell my staff I have an open door policy. If there's things that they need to discuss, or if there's any concerns, they're welcome, to come in. We try to celebrate our teachers, let them know that we appreciate them, that they're doing a fantastic job. But that can be demanding as well. You're always trying to think of something different to do, to let your teachers know that your staff know that you appreciate them.
Awesome. So as an administrator, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of your job?
I would say the most challenging aspect of my job is trying to make certain that I am always doing the right thing. Even when others may not think it's the right thing, it is that I'm trying to make certain that our students are in a positive learning environment, that they're safe, and that we're meeting the standards. And so I think that there's so much more that I could do, but those are the top three that I can think of that are very important.
Awesome. Out of all your years in education, 25 years in the game now, what would you say has been the most rewarding aspect of your career?
The most rewarding aspect is when you are in the community and you happen to see a student that you might not have seen, in some time, and the first thing you have to think about, what is their name? I've had so many to go through, and it's very rewarding when they say, "Hi, Miss Houston-Jones." A lot of them call me Miss Houston. Hi, Miss Houston. And I had one who I saw who's working at one of the restaurants here, and she was just very encouraging to say, and it was really nice to see her working. And she said, "Well, I attribute that to Paducah Middle." you guys guided me. That was very, reassuring to hear that she thought that much of us.
Oh yeah, I think that's always such a rewarding part of teaching. True, you might not be the millionaire when you go into this career, but to see the successes of your students is such a rewarding thing. I'm now seeing some of the first group of kids that I taught that are now completing college, and I'm like, oh wow, like you're full-blown adults now, and you're doing something with your life. That is such a rewarding aspect. With the little bit of time that we have left, I would like for you to just kind of talk about how important education is to the viewers and the parents out there, and just little tidbits of things that they can do to get involved.
One, I would say the most important thing is, know what's going on with your child. It is so important that you know who their friends are, check their cell phones, see who they're talking to, what they're doing, in regards to that. Be in touch with the school. Because if you don't know what's going on, then how can you be helpful? And we want to be helpful too. So contact us. Come in and volunteer your time. Come in and check on your child. We're always here to help. One of the things I can say is we're always encouraging our students to read, read, read. So if they could read every night for 20 minutes, we do feel that will help them be better readers.
Well, awesome. I want to thank you for being on the show today, Ms. Houston-Jones. And I want to thank all of the viewers out there for watching Power to the People. Make sure you follow us on Facebook at Paducah NAACP and catch us for the next show.